Hey there everyone, it's Dakota Diesel and welcome to another movie review. Today we're looking at both the greatest and most controversial movie of all time, D.W. Griffin's Birth of a Nation. So let's get into a little American history because this will be important for the film. In 1861, a well-known war known as the American Civil War started, with tensions on slavery and political feuds from the North and South. The war lasted on for 4 years, and with the war, slavery was now over at both the South and the North, and blacks were now free with Reconstruction on the way. One of the people who served in the war as a Confederate was Jacob Wark Griffin, who would later have a son named David Wark Griffin. Griffin's father would tell him stories about his day as a soldier in the Civil War, and this would inspire Griffin to make Civil War films when he was a director. When Griffin started out as a director, he first worked for Biograph, making short films from 1908 to 1914. After a bit of disagreement between Griffin and Biograph, Griffin left Biograph and went to Multi-Film Corporation to make some more feature films for the studio. It was at this point Griffin decided to do something a little risky. He took a look at Thomas Dixon's novel, The Klansman, and Leper Spots, and had a plan to make a big project out of them, and production began in 1914. With a film like Birth of a Nation, it took a few months of filming and editing, as well as finding the sets for some scenes. Griffin agreed to pay Thomas $10,000 for the rights to his play. However, with the budget Griffin spent on the movie, he was only able to give Dixon $2,500 and promised to pay him in 25% interest in the film when it was released. Dixon agreed, and Griffin continued making the film. Some of the actors that Griffin worked with during his years in Biograph helped with this film as well, such as Lillian Gish and Henry B. Walthall. The location of the film, mainly the plantation, was filmed at Nazi, Mississippi. Griffin put a lot into the film, as not only was this his biggest Civil War film, but this film would be released on the 50th anniversary when the Civil War came to an end. He put in as much advanced camera tricks as he could, with the help from the West Point engineers. Some of the scenes for the Civil War stories were based on real-life photos of the war, while some of the scenes of the Reconstruction era were based on political cartoons. Griffin also wanted a live orchestra soundtrack for the movie. The score was composed by Joseph Carl Berlin. Some of the score was taken from classical music, such as Ride of the Valkyries and Beethoven's Sixth Symphony. Others were based on Southern melodies such as Dixie and America the Beautiful, but Joseph also put some original scores in too. The theme he used for the romance between Elsa Stoneman and Ben Cameron would later be known as the Perfect Song. After all the hard work the film crew went through, the film premiered on February 8, 1915 in Los Angeles. Okay, so this movie is one of those movies where you have to be careful on how you go about with it, because it's regarded as both an innovative and very controversial movie of all time. And the only way to review a movie like this is to address both the arguments that are made in the movie and draw our own conclusions, because it would be very easy for me to say that this film is racist, and it will also be very easy for me to say that this is one of the greatest films without addressing any of the problems. So with that, what did I think of Birth of a Nation? Okay, let's get the big... Okay, big is probably not the right word for this, but this is the hugest complaint I've ever seen anyone give to a movie before: the portrayal of African Americans. Now, the first half of the film, the Civil War story, doesn't focus that much on blacks. The first half focuses mainly on the Stonemans and the Camerons' involvement on the Civil War. It's the second half of the story, the Reconstruction story, that most people have a problem, and I do see the problem. This film really wants you to feel sorry for Southern whites, and in a way I can kinda see what Griffin was trying to say. Now, I don't mind if Griffin wanted to tell a story of the Civil War from a Southerner's point of view, or having an argument about letting somebody have some sort of authority power and taking it too far. However, what makes the argument very weak is that it's very black and white. No pun intended. The movie is pretty one-sided, and it doesn't show any of the good or bad from both sides of the argument. It's pretty much this side is all bad and only this side is Jesus. And that's not me just saying it, that's basically what the movie is saying as well. If the movie actually took the time and explored both groups of their strengths and weaknesses, and it also shows the effects on both races, not just one, then it probably wouldn't be as bad as it is. But since Griffin put too much fantasy in the film, that it fails pretty miserably on trying to get any sort of message he was trying to get. Now, with that said, is there anything in the movie that's actually good? Well, this is both a positive and a negative, and that's the story. D.W. Griffith is what I would like to call the Stephen King of silent films. What I mean by this is that the story is not a bad type of story. Despite the extreme racist moments, it's got characters that each have their own motives, with some action, and it flows pretty nicely for a 3-hour movie. I mean, when I first saw this movie, I felt like it was going by real smoothly, and the camera angles, shots, point of views really helped the action and kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time I was watching the film. So this film does a good job of keeping your interest for as long as you want. Even if I know all the plot to the film, I still find some of the scenes to be great. However, one of Griffith's weaknesses when it comes to the story is sometimes you'll have a scene play out for too long. And I understand that this was one of the few feature-length movies to come out during the decade, but A Trip to the Moon kept the story flow a little bit more nicely. When we got to the climax of the KKK, at first the shots were great, and again the build-up was a little good too. But after a while, I got so bored I wanted this movie to end already. It's a shame that with a movie that was really advanced at the time and still looks good to me can have a pretty dangerous and weak message within it. If I was to remake this movie in terms of story, I would make both sides of the African soldiers and the KKK more realistic and human type, and I wouldn't just make one side look very good with no weaknesses and the other look like it was from hell. I would give both of the groups their pros and cons and their motivations and just let the people themselves decide which one was more effective. To the people that have strong criticism of the movie, believe me, I can see it, but I can't bring myself to hate this movie as much as I want to. In my opinion, even with the extreme racism in this movie, I don't regret seeing this movie. In fact, I'm glad I saw it. Yes, there are huge problems with the film, even outside the racism, but I respect the movie for helping making feature films popular and taking movies a little bit more seriously. Believe it or not, The Birth of a Nation had its fair share of praises and criticisms even after its first release. Audiences were thrilled with the movie's story, action, and characters, but it also received major criticisms from the NAACP for its extreme racist portrayal of blacks and pro-Klan story. They were so angry that the NAACP tried to ban the film, and for a while the film was banned in places like Chicago, Ohio, Los Angeles, and others, while others like Boston resulted in a few riots. Although the NAACP wasn't successful in getting the film banned, they did at least get 2 scenes cut from the movie. One was a love scene between a Reconstruction senator and his mistress, and a fight scene. The Birth of a Nation was also the first American film to be screened at the White House under President Woodrow Wilson, thanks to Thomas Dixon, who knew Wilson from a university. Wilson stated that the film is like writing history with lightning. However, it was later said that the report was false and was likely coined by Thomas Dixon for self-publicity, and Wilson tried to keep a self-distance from the film, later calling it an unfortunate production. Despite the major criticism, The Birth of a Nation was the biggest box office hit of all of movie history, grossing to what we believe to be about $11 million worldwide, making this one of the biggest blockbuster movies of all time. The film was also re-released in theaters 3 times, in 1924, 1931, and 1938. Today, Birth of a Nation still gets the mixed thoughts from critics and people alike. It became an early example of films people either like or people hate. Critics like Roger Ebert stated that The Birth of a Nation is not a bad film because it argues for evil, but a great film because it argues for evil, and that it presents a challenge for a modern audience. But it's also noted that the film helped reform the KKK in the 1920s. Even right now, in this year, there are still people that are giving their thoughts on the movie, and each are interesting to read. I don't normally do this, but this is one of the few times where I encourage people to don't just watch my review, but check out others' thoughts on this movie, because it is an interesting movie to talk about, and it's one of those films where you must see to believe and form your own opinion on it. Just keep in mind of the story and the time period this was made in. The Birth of a Nation was a both successful and a very controversial film of all time. Well guys, that'll about do it. Thank you all so much, and let me know what you guys thought about Birth of a Nation, because this time I am really interested to know what you really think about this movie, and I really want to know if you really agreed or disagree with me. Just try to keep the comments as civil as you can. Anyway though, if you guys like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you guys want to see more movie reviews, hit the subscribe button as well. And if you guys got any movies, TV shows, or games you want me to review, either list them in the comments on YouTube or list them on Patreon. And also don't forget to donate a few dollars on Patreon if you guys want to see any sneak peeks of new videos or new full videos before they go up on YouTube. So until then, this is Sakura Diesel saying thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next movie review. Take care, everybody.